Time to erase everything. Start over from nothing, just like I had to.
The photograph fell from Lena's laptop like a dead bird hitting pavement. I picked it up, squinting at the property listing in the dim light of our bedroom. Another luxury flip. Another six-figure profit she'd mentioned casually over breakfast, like discussing the weather. But this time something crawled up my spine and stayed there. The holding company name at the bottom, Winsong Holdings, LLC. I'd used that name 8 years ago, back when I was running dirty money through shell companies for guys who didn't ask questions and didn't give second chances. I'd buried that name so deep I figured it would never see daylight again. Never told a soul about it, not even Lena. So how the hell was it on her paperwork? I sat on the edge of our bed, staring at the photograph until the numbers blurred together. The house was a Spanish colonial in Beverly Hills, recently renovated, asking price $2.4 million. Standard stuff for Lena's operation. She specialized in quick flips for cash buyers who didn't mind paying premium prices for privacy. The kind of buyers who reminded me of my old clients. I powered up her laptop while she showered. The password was still our anniversary date. She'd never been creative with security. Her email opened like a confession booth, and I started reading. 20 minutes later, I understood why she'd been working late so many nights, why she'd been getting calls at odd hours, why she'd started looking at me like I was a problem she needed to solve. Lena wasn't just flipping houses. She was washing money through them, using shell companies I'd created in my previous life. Companies she had no legal right to use. Companies that still carried my digital fingerprints all over them. She was framing me. The bathroom door opened and steam rolled out like smoke from a fire. Lena emerged wrapped in a white towel, her dark hair slicked back, looking like she'd stepped out of a magazine advertisement for expensive betrayal. "You're up late," she said, not looking at me. "Couldn't sleep." She moved to her dresser and started applying moisturizer to her legs with practiced efficiency. Everything Lena did was practiced, calculated. Even the way she breathed seemed choreographed. "I saw your latest listing," I said. "Which one?" "Beverly Hills, the Spanish colonial." Her hands paused for maybe half a second. "What about it?" "Winsong Holdings." This time she stopped completely. Turned to face me with an expression I'd never seen before. Not guilt, not surprise, something colder. "You recognize that name?" she asked. "Should I?" She smiled, and it was like watching a snake decide whether to strike. "You tell me, Vincent." The way she said my full name made my chest tighten. Lena only used Vincent when she was angry or when she was about to cut deep. This felt like both. "I think we need to talk," I said. "Do we?" She dropped the towel and started getting dressed. Black slacks, white blouse, like she was preparing for a business meeting at midnight. Maybe she was. "I know what you've been doing," I said. "Enlighten me." "Using my old companies. My names, my infrastructure. You're running a laundering operation through real estate transactions, and you're using my past to do it." She finished buttoning her blouse and turned to face me fully. The smile was gone, replaced by something that looked almost like pity. "Your past?" she said. "Vincent, your past is my present. Has been for 3 years." "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means I didn't steal your companies. I inherited them. The day I married you, I became a partner in all your previous sins. Legal wife, legal access, legal liability." She moved closer, and I could smell her perfume mixed with something sharper. Fear, maybe, or excitement. "The only difference is, I'm better at it than you ever were." I stood up, the laptop sliding off my knees. "You're putting my name on federal crimes. Your name was already on federal crimes. I'm just making them profitable. The feds will trace this back to you. Yes, they will." She moved to the closet and pulled out a jacket. "In fact, they already have. Agent Wexler from the Financial Crimes Division has been asking questions about you for 6 months. Seems someone tipped them off about unusual real estate activity connected to your old associates." The room felt like it was tilting. "Someone?" "Me, Vincent. I gave them your name because I needed insurance. If this operation goes sideways, they need someone to blame, someone with a history. Someone expendable." She was putting on earrings now, like we were discussing dinner plans. "You set me up." "I protected myself." "There's a difference." I watched her finish getting ready, my mind cycling through everything I thought I knew about my wife, my life, my future, all of it smoke. Where are you going? I asked. To see Joel. Joel Bruner, assistant district attorney. I'd met him twice at parties Lena dragged me to. Tall guy with silver hair and a politician's handshake. He'd always looked at me like I was something stuck to his shoe. Joel knows about this. Joel knows about everything. He's the one who helped me structure the legal framework. Turns out prosecutors understand crime better than criminals do. She grabbed her purse and headed for the door. Lena. She stopped, but didn't turn around. Why? Because I got tired of being married to a pawn shop owner who used to be somebody dangerous. I wanted to be married to somebody who still was. The door closed behind her with a soft click, and I was alone with the wreckage of everything I'd built since going straight. I didn't sleep. Instead, I sat in my kitchen drinking coffee and staring at Lena's laptop until the sun came up. By 6 a.m., I'd mapped out her entire operation. She was good. Better than good. She'd taken my old shell company structure and improved it, created a network of dummy buyers and sellers that move money through high-end real estate like water through a sieve. The properties were real, the transactions were legal, but the money was dirty as a grave. And my name was on everything. Not obviously, she was too smart for that. But the digital fingerprints were there, embedded in the company registrations, the bank authorizations, the legal documents. If the feds wanted to build a case, they'd have enough evidence to bury me for 20 years. The front door opened, and Lena walked in, looking like she'd spent the night at a spa instead of planning my destruction. She saw me at the kitchen table and paused. "You look terrible," she said. "Couldn't sleep." "Guilty conscience?" I closed the laptop. "Where were you?" "Joel's place. We had things to discuss." "About me?" She poured herself coffee and sat across from me. Up close, I could see she was wearing different clothes than when she'd left. Same style, different fabric, like she kept a wardrobe at Joel's place. "Agent Wexler wants to interview you," she said. "When?" "Tomorrow." 10 a.m. at the Federal Building downtown. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. "You already agreed to it?" "I told him you'd cooperate fully. After all, you have nothing to hide, right?" The way she said it made it clear she knew exactly how much I had to hide. What does Joel get out of this? Protection. Plausible deniability. When this comes out, he's the prosecutor who helped expose the criminal, not the one who enabled him. And you? I get to disappear. She stood up and started making breakfast like we were having a normal conversation about normal things. But nothing about this was normal anymore. Disappear where? That's not your concern anymore, Vincent. I watched her crack eggs into a pan, her movements precise and unhurried. 3 years of marriage, and I was seeing her clearly for the first time. "You planned this from the beginning," I said. "Not from the beginning. From about 6 months after we got married, when I realized how boring legitimate money was. So you decided to steal mine. I decided to use yours. More efficiently than you ever did." The eggs sizzled in the pan, and the smell made my stomach turn. "The feds will want to know how I accessed all those old companies after being out of the game for so long. You'll think of something. You're creative. Or maybe I'll tell them the truth." She turned to look at me, spatula in hand. "The truth is that you're a career criminal who got greedy and came out of retirement. The truth is that there's enough evidence in those companies to connect you to half the major money laundering operations on the West Coast over the past decade. The truth is that if you try to implicate me, you'll just sound like a desperate man trying to blame his wife for his own crimes." She was right. I could see it playing out exactly the way she described. A federal prosecutor, a respected real estate agent, and an ex-con pawn shop owner. The jury wouldn't even need to deliberate. You're going to let me take the fall for everything. You were always going to take the fall for something, Vincent. At least this way, it's profitable. She plated the eggs and set them in front of me. I looked down at the perfect over-easy presentation and felt like throwing up. "Eat," she said. "You'll need your strength for tomorrow." Instead, I pushed back from the table and headed for the door. "Where are you going?" "To open the shop." "Vincent." I turned back. "Don't do anything stupid. Joel has friends everywhere. They'll be watching." I left without saying anything else. But as I drove toward my pawn shop, I was already making plans she wouldn't like. The pawn shop squatted between a laundromat and a check cashing place, like a toad between two stones. I'd bought it 5 years ago with clean money, painted it blue, and turned it into something honest. The neon sign in the window flickered between open and pen, which seemed appropriate given my current situation. I unlocked the front door and flipped the sign, but I wasn't really open for business. I was open for thinking. The bell above the door chimed around noon, and Cruz Ortega walked in like he owned the place. He hadn't changed much in the 8 years since I'd last seen him. Still skinny as a fence post, still twitching like he had electricity running through his veins, still wearing leather jackets in 90-degree weather. "Vince," he said, grinning like a skull. "Heard you were in trouble? Word travels fast. Faster than you'd think. Joel Brunner's been asking questions about you, through channels." I locked the front door and flipped the sign to closed. What kind of questions? The kind that end with people disappearing. Cruz had always been connected. Back in the day, he'd been my courier when things got too hot for electronic transfers. Now he ran with a motorcycle club that handled security for people who needed their problems to disappear quietly. What do you know about Brunner? Enough. He's dirty, but he's smart about it. Uses his position to protect certain operations in exchange for percentage points. Word is he's got a thing for expensive women and expensive habits. Meaning? Meaning he likes call girls and cocaine, not necessarily in that order. I sat behind the counter and looked at Cruz. He was studying me with those hunter eyes like he was calculating how much trouble I was worth. "I need a favor," I said. "What kind of favor?" "The kind that even scores." Cruz grinned wider. "Now you're talking my language." "What's the target?" "Lena's got a deal closing Friday, 600,000 cash, Beverly Hills property. I want it to fall through." "That's easy. We make the buyer disappear?" "Nothing violent, just unreliable." "Unreliable I can do." "What else?" "Joel Brunner. I need him to have a bad week." Cruz pulled out his phone and scrolled through contacts. "I know someone who knows someone. What kind of bad week?" "The kind that gets him arrested." "On what charge?" "Possession." "Distribution. Your choice." Cruz's grin turned carnivory. "Now we're having fun. When do you need this done?" "Soon as possible." "Cost you $5,000. "Done." He stood up and headed for the door, then paused. "Vince? Yeah? You sure you want back in this game? It's gotten rougher since you left." I thought about Lena sitting in my kitchen, calmly explaining how she'd destroyed my life while cooking breakfast. About Agent Wexler waiting for me tomorrow with questions I couldn't answer. About Joel Brunner sleeping with my wife while helping her frame me for federal crimes. "I was never out," I said. Cruz nodded and left, the bell chiming behind him like a death knell. I spent the rest of the day going through old files, pulling up contact information for people I'd hoped never to call again. The criminal underworld was like any other business. It ran on relationships and reputation. I'd built both over 15 years of moving dirty money, and I was about to cash in every favor I'd ever earned. My first call was to a woman named Kara Wills. She worked for Pacific Trust Bank, had access to account information that wasn't supposed to be accessible, and owed me for keeping her brother out of prison 10 years ago. "Vincent Malloy," she said when she answered. "I was wondering when you'd call." "You heard? I hear everything. Your wife's been busy." "Can you help?" "Depends what you need." "Account information. Lena's operation." "I need to know where she's keeping the money." "That's risky." "So is letting her walk away with everything." There was a pause. "Meet me at Murphy's bar at 8. Come alone." She hung up and I made my next call. By 7 p.m., I'd assembled a small army of people who had reasons to help me and skills I needed. Nothing violent, nothing that would land anyone in federal prison, but enough to make Lena's carefully constructed world collapse like a house of cards. Murphy's bar was the kind of place where people minded their own business and the security cameras hadn't worked in years. Kara was waiting in a back booth, looking nervous but determined. She'd gained weight since I'd last seen her, and there were gray streaks in her red hair, but her eyes were still sharp enough to cut glass. "You look like hell," she said as I sat down. "Feel worse." "I looked into your wife's accounts. She's good. Really good. Multiple banks, multiple names, everything structured to look legitimate. But she's been sloppy with the timing. Large deposits followed immediately by property purchases, all using shell companies registered to addresses that don't exist. It's a pattern, and patterns are what get people caught." She slid a manila envelope across the table. "Account numbers, routing information, transaction histories, everything you need to lock her out of her own operation." I opened the envelope and scanned the documents. Lena had been busy. Over the past 2 years, she'd moved nearly $8 million through various accounts, skimming percentage points on every transaction. How much of this is traceable to me? All of it. She used your old company structures as authorization for most of the transfers. If the feds freeze these accounts, your name will be all over the paperwork. Unless someone with bank access freezes them first and transfers the funds to accounts she can't touch. Kara leaned forward. I can do it, Vincent. But if I get caught, I'm looking at 20 years federal time. What do you want? 200,000. And a guarantee that if this goes sideways, you'll take care of my family. It was a lot of money, but it was Lena's money. And after tomorrow, I might not be in a position to negotiate anything. Done. She nodded and finished her drink. Give me 12 hours. By tomorrow morning, your wife will be locked out of everything. After she left, I sat in the booth for another hour, thinking about the meeting with Agent Wexler in the morning. I could run, disappear into Mexico or Canada and start over somewhere else. But running meant letting Lena win, and I'd already decided that wasn't going to happen. My phone buzzed with a text from Cruz. Package delivered. Check the news tomorrow. I paid my tab and drove home, where Lena was waiting with a bottle of wine and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. How was your day? She asked. Productive. Good. We should talk about tomorrow. She poured 2 glasses of wine and handed me one. I took it, but didn't drink. Agent Wexler is going to ask you about the shell companies, she said. About how you gained access to them after being clean for so long. What should I tell him? The truth. That you never really went clean. That you've been using the pawn shop as a front for continued money laundering operations. That the real estate transactions were just an expansion of your existing criminal enterprise. I set down the wine glass. And what about you? I'll be devastated to learn that my husband was living a double life. Shocked to discover that the man I trusted was using our marriage as cover for federal crimes? Very convincing. I've been practicing. She moved closer, and I could smell her perfume mixed with something that might have been Joel's cologne. You don't have to make this harder than it needs to be, Vincent. Cooperate with the investigation. Take the plea deal they'll offer, serve your time. I'll visit you in prison. Maybe we can work things out when you get released. How long do you think I'll get? With your history? 15 years, maybe 20. But you'll be out before you're 65. That's still time to start over. I nodded like I was considering it. And you'll wait for me? Of course. It was the first time she'd lied to me badly enough that I could see it. She had no intention of being anywhere I could find her when I got out of prison. By the time my sentence was up, Lena would be living under a different name in a different country with money I'd helped her steal. I should get some sleep, I said. Big day tomorrow. Yes, it is. I went to the bedroom and lay down fully clothed while Lena finished her wine in the living room. Around midnight, I heard her get a phone call. She talked in whispers for about 10 minutes, then hung up and went to the guest bathroom to shower. When she came out, she was wearing a black dress and heels. Going somewhere? I called out. Joel wants to see me. Last-minute preparation for tomorrow. At midnight? He's a thorough man. She left without saying goodbye, and I was alone with my thoughts and my plans. In 6 hours, I'd be sitting across from a federal agent trying to decide how much of my life to trade for a chance at revenge. But Lena had made one mistake in her perfect plan. She'd assumed I was the same man she'd married 3 years ago. The kind of man who'd accept defeat gracefully and take his punishment like a gentleman. She was about to learn how wrong she was. Agent Wexler looked exactly like Central Casting would order for a federal investigator. Gray suit, gray hair, gray eyes that missed nothing. He had a file folder in front of him that was thick enough to stop a bullet, and when he opened it, I saw my photograph clipped to the inside cover. Mr. Malloy, he said, thank you for coming in. My wife said you wanted to ask some questions. Your wife has been very cooperative, very forthcoming about your activities. The interview room was painted institutional green and smelled like disinfectant and fear. There was a camera in the corner, probably recording everything, and a two-way mirror that definitely had people behind it. What kind of activities? Wexler pulled out a stack of documents and spread them across the table like he was dealing cards. Bank statements, property deeds, corporate filings. All of it connected to shell companies I'd created in what felt like another lifetime. Winsong Holdings, Pacific Rim Investments, Golden State Properties, he said, reading from the documents. Ring any bells? Should they? They should, considering you're listed as the founding member of all three companies. He was right. My name was there in black and white, along with signatures that looked enough like mine to pass casual inspection. Lena had been thorough. I've never seen these documents before, I said. Really? Because according to bank records, these companies have been moving significant amounts of money through real estate transactions over the past 2 years. Money that appears to have originated from sources we're very interested in. I looked at the documents more carefully. The transactions were real, the money trail was clear, and my supposed involvement was documented in enough detail to convince a jury. Agent Wexler, I run a pawn shop. I haven't been involved in any real estate transactions. What about money laundering transactions? Not for 8 years, but you were involved before? I'd walked into that one. I served my time. You served 18 months for financial fraud, but money laundering carries a much heavier sentence, doesn't it? He was fishing, but he was fishing in water where I'd left plenty of evidence over the years. The smart play was to ask for a lawyer and shut up, but the smart play wouldn't give me what I needed. I'd like to make a deal, I said. Wexler leaned back in his chair. What kind of deal? Information for immunity. What kind of information? The kind that tells you who's really behind these companies. For the first time, Wexler looked interested. Go on. These aren't my operations. Someone's been using my name, my old company structures, my past relationships to build a money laundering network. I can give you names, account numbers, transaction details, everything you need to take down the real criminals, in exchange for full immunity and protection. Wexler gathered up the documents and put them back in the folder. I'll need to discuss this with my superiors. Don't leave town, Mr. Malloy. How long do I have? 24 hours. After that, we move forward with what we have. I left the federal building feeling like a man who'd just sold his soul to buy himself time. But time was all I needed. By tomorrow, Lena's world would be coming apart at the seams. My phone rang as I got to my car. Cruz. Turn on Channel 7, he said. I found a radio and tuned into the news. The lead story was about a prominent assistant district attorney being arrested on drug charges after being found with cocaine and an unregistered firearm in his vehicle outside a downtown motel. Joel Brunner's mugshot filled my mental image of the radio announcer's description, and he looked like a man whose life had just exploded. How? I asked Cruz. Sasha. She's a working girl who services lawyers and politicians. Joel's been a regular customer for 2 years. Last night, she planted a little surprise in his car while he was distracted. What about the gun? Untraceable piece tied to an unsolved shooting from 2018. Joel's going to have a hard time explaining that one? I felt something cold and satisfied settle in my chest. What's Sasha getting out of this? Enough money to retire from the business. Plus, Joel was never gentle with the girls. She was happy to help. I hung up and drove to the pawn shop, where I found Lena waiting in the parking lot. She was standing next to her white BMW, and even from 50 feet away, I could see she was furious. We need to talk, she said as I got out of my car. About what? About Joel, about what you did. I unlocked the shop and let her follow me inside. She was wearing a different outfit than yesterday. Black pants, red blouse, like she was dressed for war. I don't know what you're talking about. Joel was arrested last night. Cocaine possession, illegal weapons charges. Someone set him up. Sounds like Joel made some poor choices. She moved around the counter until we were facing each other across 3 feet of space that felt like a minefield. This was you. Prove it. I don't have to prove it. I know it. Her voice was getting higher, sharper. You think you're clever? You think you can play games with people like Joel? People like Joel. People with power, people with connections. People who can crush you like a bug. I sat down on the stool behind the register and looked at her. Really looked at her. 3 years of marriage, and I was finally seeing the real Lena. Not the woman who made me breakfast and pretended to care about my day. The one who'd been planning my destruction since our honeymoon. Joel's finished, I said. Career over, reputation destroyed, looking at serious prison time. Whatever protection he was offering you is gone. I don't need Joel anymore. No, Who's going to cover for you when the feds start asking questions about those shell companies? Something flickered across her face. Uncertainty, maybe, or fear. The companies are legitimate. They're registered to addresses that don't exist, funded by accounts that can't be traced, and connected to transactions that smell like money laundering from space. How long do you think it'll take Agent Wexler to figure out you're the one who's been running them? He won't, because you're going to take the blame. That's what this is about, remember? You're the criminal with a history. I'm just the innocent wife who got caught up in her husband's crimes. I opened the register and pulled out a manila envelope, set it on the counter between us. What's that? Account statements, transaction records. Evidence that shows exactly who's been moving money through those shell companies for the past 2 years. She reached for the envelope, but I pulled it back. It's all here, Lena. Every deposit, every transfer, every penny you skimmed off the top. All traced back to accounts in your name. Those accounts are protected. Were protected. As of this morning, they're frozen. All of them. I watched the blood drain from her face as the implications hit her. You can't do that. I just did. I have backup accounts, safety nets. Had, past tense. My contact at Pacific Trust was very thorough. She grabbed for the envelope, but I was faster. The papers scattered across the floor as we struggled, and I got a good look at the desperation in her eyes. You son of a bitch, she said, breathing hard. You don't know what you've done. I know exactly what I've done. I've cut off your escape route. There are people involved in this you don't understand. People who won't accept losing $8 million gracefully. Your problem, not mine. She backed away from the counter, smoothing down her blouse with shaking hands. This isn't over, Vincent. Yes, it is. She headed for the door, then stopped and turned back. I loved you, she said. In the beginning, I really did. No, you didn't. You loved the idea of being married to someone dangerous. When you realized I wasn't dangerous anymore, you decided to make me dangerous again. Just not the way you planned. She left without saying anything else, and I was alone with the scattered evidence of her crimes and the satisfaction of knowing I'd just destroyed her life as efficiently as she'd tried to destroy mine. But I wasn't done yet. The call came at 3 in the morning. I was lying in bed staring at the ceiling and listening to the house settle around me when my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. Vincent? The voice was female, shaky, scared. Who is this? It's Lena. I need help. I sat up and turned on the bedside lamp. Where are you? Downtown, near the Federal Building. Vincent, they froze everything. Every account, every safety deposit box, every asset I had access to. I can't even get money for a hotel room. Sounds like a personal problem. Please, I know I hurt you, but I'm scared. There are people looking for me. People who want their money back. I could hear traffic in the background and what sounded like sirens in the distance. What people? The investors, the ones whose money I was washing through the real estate deals. They're not the kind of people who accept losses gracefully. Where's Joel? Still in jail. His lawyer says he's looking at 5 to 10 years minimum. He can't help me anymore. I got out of bed and walked to the window. The street was empty except for a stray cat picking through garbage cans. What do you want from me? I need money, just enough to disappear until this blows over. How much? 50,000. I know it's a lot, but it's not a lot. It's everything I have in my legitimate accounts. Vincent, please, I'm begging you. There was something in her voice I'd never heard before. Real fear. Actual desperation. It was almost enough to make me feel sorry for her. Almost. Meet me at the shop tomorrow morning, I said. 9 a.m. Thank you. Vincent, I hung up and went back to bed. But I didn't sleep. Instead, I lay there thinking about the conversation I'd had with Cruz earlier that evening. She's going to run, he'd said. Soon as she realizes how deep the hole is, she'll disappear. Let her run. I've got her money. Money's not the only thing keeping her here. She's got obligations to people who don't care about frozen bank accounts. What kind of obligations? The kind that get you eliminated if you don't honor them. I'd asked him to keep an eye on Lena, make sure she didn't leave town before I was finished with her, but I hadn't expected her to come to me for help. At 8:30 the next morning, I opened the pawn shop and waited. Lena arrived exactly on time, looking like she'd slept in her clothes and hadn't eaten in days. The confident, polished woman I'd married was gone, replaced by someone who looked like she'd been running from monsters. "You look terrible," I said as she came through the door. "I feel worse." I locked the door behind her and flipped the sign to closed. "Tell me about these investors." She sat down in the customer chair across from my desk and put her head in her hands. "They're Russians, Bratva. They needed clean money and I provided a service. But now that the accounts are frozen, they think I stole from them." "Did you?" "I skimmed. Nothing major, just a few percentage points on each transaction." "Standard operating procedure. How much?" "About 2 million over 2 years." I let out a low whistle. "That's not skimming, that's theft." I was going to pay it back when I disappeared. Set up a wire transfer from a Swiss account, make it look like I'd found the missing funds. "But you can't do that now because all your accounts are frozen." "Right." I opened my desk drawer and pulled out a cashier's check. "Set it on the desk between us." 50,000, I said. "Like you asked." She picked up the check and stared at it like it was a winning lottery ticket. "Thank you," she said. "Vincent, I know I don't deserve this, but there's a condition." She looked up at me with those green eyes that had convinced me to marry her 3 years ago. "What kind of condition?" "I want you to sign over everything. The house, the business accounts, the shell companies, all of it. Legal ownership transferred to me. Vincent, most of that is already frozen or under investigation. Not all of it. There are still assets you control." "I want them." She was quiet for a long time, and I could see her mind working through the possibilities. The check was her ticket out of town, but signing over her assets would leave her with nothing to come back to. "If I do this, I can never come back," she said. "That's the idea." "And if I don't?" "Then you can give the check back and figure out another way to deal with your Russian friends." She looked around the pawn shop like she was seeing it for the first time. At the guitars hanging on the walls, the jewelry cases full of wedding rings that hadn't worked out, the electronics that people had traded for quick cash. "This is what you want? This little shop and a life that goes nowhere? I want a life without you in it." She signed the papers without reading them. Every document I put in front of her, she signed with the resigned efficiency of someone who'd run out of choices. When it was over, I handed her a manila envelope. "What's this?" "Travel documents, new identity, passport, credit cards. Enough to get you somewhere safe and start over." She opened the envelope and looked through the contents. Everything looked real because it was real. Cruz had connections that could produce documents that would pass any inspection. "The passport says Maria Santos," she said. "Your new name. The credit cards have a $50,000 limit, enough to keep you comfortable while you figure out your next move." "Where am I supposed to go?" "Argentina. Buenos Aires. Big city, easy to disappear, no extradition treaty with the United States." "You've thought of everything." "I try to be thorough." She stood up and put the envelope in her purse, then looked at me one more time. "I really did love you, Vincent. Maybe not the way you wanted, but in my own way." "I know. Will you remember the good times?" "I'll try to forget all of it." She nodded and headed for the door, then paused with her hand on the lock. "The flight leaves tonight at 11. LAX to Miami, then Miami to Buenos Aires. Don't miss it." "I won't." She unlocked the door and stepped out into the morning sunlight. I watched through the window as she got into her BMW and drove away, probably for the last time. Then I called Cruz. "It's done," I said. "She's got the documents and the money." "Flight leaves tonight. You sure about this?" "Positive. Because once she gets on that plane, there's no taking it back. That's the point." I hung up and spent the rest of the day going through Lena's papers, organizing the assets she'd signed. Over to me. The house was worth about $400,000 after the mortgage. The business accounts contained another $100,000 in clean money. The shell companies were worthless now, but they'd served their purpose. By 6 p.m., I transferred everything into accounts Cruz controlled. Clean money, carefully laundered through legitimate businesses, untraceable back to any federal investigation. My phone rang at 8 p.m. Agent Wexler. "Mr. Malloy, we need to talk." "About what?" "About your wife. We've been trying to reach her for questioning, but she seems to have disappeared." "Disappeared how?" "Her house is empty, her car is gone, and her phone goes straight to voicemail." "You wouldn't happen to know where she is, would you?" I looked out the window of my apartment. Lena's BMW was parked in the driveway of what used to be our house, but the house itself was dark. I haven't seen her since yesterday, I said. That's interesting, because according to bank records, someone accessed several of her frozen accounts this morning using her personal authorization codes. My blood went cold. What kind of access? Wire transfers? About $2 million moved to accounts in the Cayman Islands. Money that was supposed to be evidence in a federal investigation? Agent Wexler, I don't know anything about Mr. Malloy. I think you should come in. Tonight. The line went dead, and I sat there staring at my phone while my carefully constructed plan crumbled around me. Lena had played me. Even at the end, even when she was desperate and scared and begging for help, she'd been running a game. The tearful phone call, the story about Russian investors, the grateful acceptance of my terms, all of it designed to make me think I'd won while she was setting up her real escape. She'd never intended to get on that plane to Argentina. She'd used my documents and my money to buy herself time while she accessed accounts I didn't know about and moved funds I couldn't trace. By now, she was probably halfway to whatever country didn't have extradition treaties and didn't ask questions about large cash deposits. I grabbed my keys and headed for the door. If Agent Wexler wanted to talk, we were going to have a lot to discuss. The federal building was mostly empty at 9 p.m., but the lights were still on in Agent Wexler's office. He was waiting for me with 2 cups of coffee and a folder that looked even thicker than the one from our previous meeting. Sit down, Mr. Malloy. I sat. The coffee was bitter and cold, like it had been sitting around for hours. Your wife is very clever, Wexler said. Cleverer than either of us gave her credit for. How so? She's been playing a double game from the beginning. While she was setting you up to take the blame for the money laundering operation, she was also skimming funds from the very people she was supposed to be helping. He opened the folder and spread out bank statements, wire transfer records, and what looked like surveillance photographs. These are accounts we didn't know about until this morning, hidden behind multiple layers of shell companies and false identities. Your wife has been moving money through them for over a year. I looked at the documents. The numbers were staggering. Over $3 million had moved through accounts registered to names I'd never heard of, all of it connected back to Lena through digital fingerprints and transaction patterns. She stole from her own clients? Not just stole. She created an entirely separate laundering operation using their money, a side business they never knew about. Where is she now? Gone. Disappeared sometime last night after accessing these accounts and moving the funds offshore. We have alerts out at every airport, border crossing, and port, but so far nothing. I set down the coffee cup and looked at Wexler. What does this have to do with me? Everything. Because according to these records, you're her partner in this operation too. He pulled out another set of documents. More signatures that looked like mine. More authorizations using my name. More evidence that I was involved in crimes I'd never committed. She used your identity for this operation the same way she used it for the real estate scam. As far as the evidence shows, Vincent Malloy is the mastermind behind a multi-million-dollar money laundering network that's been operating for over 2 years. But I'm not. I know that. You know that. But proving it in court is going to be difficult, especially with your wife conveniently unavailable to testify about what really happened. I sat back in the chair and felt the walls closing in around me. Lena had played the long game better than I'd imagined. Even her apparent defeat had been part of a larger strategy to escape with the money while leaving me holding the blame for everything. What do you want from me? I asked. The same thing I wanted yesterday. Information, names, details about the real operation. I don't know anything about the real operation, but you know something about your wife's methods, her contacts, her plans. I thought about the documents she'd signed that morning, transferring assets that probably didn't exist anymore, about the fake passport and credit cards that were probably already in a trash can somewhere, about the plane ticket to Argentina that she'd never had any intention of using. She mentioned Russian investors, I said. Bratva. People who don't accept losses gracefully. Wexler leaned forward. Names? She didn't give me names. Just said they were the source of the money she was laundering through the real estate deals. What else? She was scared of them. Really scared. Said they thought she'd stolen from them. Had she? According to her, she'd skimmed about $2 million over 2 years. Wexler made notes on a legal pad. Anything else? I told him about Joel Brunner, about the corruption in the DA's office, about the protection Lena had been receiving in exchange for sexual favors and percentage points from her operation. When I was finished, Wexler closed the folder and looked at me. "Here's what's going to happen," he said. "You're going to help us track down your wife and recover the money she stole. In exchange, we'll consider a plea agreement that keeps you out of federal prison." "What kind of plea agreement?" "Cooperation. You help us build cases against the people she was working with, and we'll recommend minimal sentencing on the charges we can prove against you." "How minimal?" 3 to 5 years, probably served in minimum security. It wasn't great, but it was better than the 20-year sentence I'd been looking at if Lena's original plan had worked. "And if I don't cooperate, then you go to trial as the mastermind of a multi-million-dollar criminal enterprise, and you spend the rest of your life in federal prison." I thought about my options. Cooperate with the feds and serve a few years, or fight the charges and probably lose everything anyway. "I'll need guarantees," I said. "What kind of guarantees?" "Protection. If I'm going to help you go after Russian organized crime, I'm going to need to make sure they can't retaliate. That can be arranged. And I want to know that you're really going after Lena, not just using me to clean up loose ends while she enjoys her retirement in whatever non-extradition country she's hiding in." "Mr. Malloy, your wife stole money from some very dangerous people. Even if we never find her, I doubt she's going to enjoy a peaceful retirement." There was something in his tone that made me think he knew more about Lena's situation than he was telling me. "What aren't you saying? The Russian investors she mentioned? They're not just dangerous, they're connected. International organized crime with resources in every major city in the world. Your wife might think she's safe, but there's nowhere she can hide where they can't reach her. You think they'll find her? I think she's got bigger problems than the FBI." I signed the cooperation agreement an hour later and walked out of the federal building with a new identity as a federal informant and a target on my back that I'd carry for the rest of my life. But as I drove home through the empty streets of Los Angeles, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months: relief. Lena had won the battle by escaping with the money, but she'd lost the war by making enemies of people who never forgot and never forgave. Wherever she was hiding, whatever name she was using, she'd spend the rest of her life looking over her shoulder and wondering when they'd finally catch up to her. It wasn't the revenge I'd planned, but it was justice of a sort. 3 weeks later, I was cleaning out the pawn shop when Cruz walked in with news that made my day considerably more interesting. "She's dead," he said without preamble. I looked up from the box of jewelry I was sorting. "Who's dead?" "Lena. They found her body in a hotel room in Tijuana yesterday. 3 bullets to the head. Professional job." I set down the necklace I'd been examining and gave Cruz my full attention. "How do you know?" "My cousin works for the Tijuana police. Calls me when interesting bodies turn up." "What was she doing in Mexico?" "Running, same as always." Word is she'd been moving around for the past month, trying to stay ahead of people who wanted their money back. I thought about the last time I'd seen her, sitting in my shop and signing papers that transferred her assets to me. She'd seemed desperate then, but also calculating, like she was playing an angle I couldn't see. Did she have the money with her? That's the interesting part. Hotel room was clean. No cash, no credit cards, no identification. Whoever eliminated her took everything. "Or she hid it somewhere," Cruz grinned. "That's what I figured you'd say." He pulled out a manila envelope and set it on my counter. "What's that?" "Information about where your wife spent her last month, who she talked to, where she might have stashed the money she stole." I opened the envelope and found surveillance photographs, hotel receipts, and what looked like phone records. "Where did you get this?" "I have friends in various places. Some of them owed me favors." The photographs showed Lena in different cities: San Diego, Phoenix, El Paso, always alone, always looking over her shoulder. The hotel receipts were all paid in cash, registered under false names. The phone records showed calls to banks in the Cayman Islands, Switzerland, and Singapore. "She was trying to move the money," I said, "but she never got the chance." According to the timeline, she was eliminated about 6 hours after making her last call to a bank in Geneva. Who eliminated her? Could have been the Russians, could have been the feds, could have been someone else entirely. Dead is dead. I looked through the photographs again. In the last few, taken in Tijuana just days before her death, Lena looked like a completely different person. Gone was the polished, confident woman I'd married. These pictures showed someone who was scared, exhausted, and running out of options. Why are you showing me this? Because I figured you'd want to know it was over. And because there's something else. Cruz pulled out a key and set it next to the envelope. Safety deposit box, Bank of San Diego, downtown branch. Box number 247. How do you know about this? Because I was the one who helped her set it up 2 years ago. Back when you and I were still tight before you went straight and stopped taking my calls. I picked up the key and turned it over in my palm. It was small and brass and felt heavier than it should have. What's in the box? Don't know. She never told me and I never asked. Professional courtesy. Why didn't she empty it before she ran? Maybe she forgot about it. Maybe she was saving it for an emergency. Maybe she never got the chance. I put the key in my pocket and looked at Cruz. What do you want for this? Nothing. Consider it a wedding gift. 3 years late, but better than never. After he left, I sat in the shop for a long time, thinking about safety deposit boxes and dead wives and the possibility that Lena had left behind one final surprise. The next morning, I drove to San Diego. The Bank of San Diego was a gleaming glass tower in the financial district, the kind of place where people moved serious money and asked minimal questions. I presented the key and identification to a guard who looked like he could bench press a Buick, and he escorted me to a private room in the basement. Box 247 was larger than I'd expected, big enough to hold several manila folders and what felt like stacks of currency. I opened it carefully, not sure what I'd find. The first thing I saw was cash, lots of it. $100 bills bound with rubber bands, stacked neatly in rows. I counted quickly and estimated about $200,000. Underneath the cash were documents, bank account information for institutions I'd never heard of, in countries I couldn't pronounce, access codes, routing numbers, authorization forms, everything someone would need to move money electronically without leaving traces. At the bottom of the box was a single sheet of paper with my name written across the top in Lena's handwriting. Vincent, it read. If you're reading this, then I'm probably dead, and you're probably the one who found me first. The accounts listed here contain about $4 million in clean money, money I skimmed from various operations over the years and kept separate from everything else. Consider it my life insurance policy or my apology or both. I know I hurt you, but I want you to know that everything I did was because I loved you. Maybe not the way you wanted to be loved, but the way I knew how. Take the money and disappear. Start over somewhere safe. Don't make the same mistakes I did. L. I read the note 3 times, then folded it and put it in my pocket, along with the account information. The cash went into a gym bag I'd brought for this purpose. As I walked out of the bank, I thought about the woman who'd written that note. Not the manipulative criminal who'd tried to frame me for her crimes, but the scared, desperate person who'd spent her last month running from people who wanted her dead. Maybe she had loved me in her own twisted way. Maybe the whole thing had started as love and evolved into something else when she realized how boring legitimate life was. Or maybe she was still running games even from beyond the grave, leaving behind a final manipulation designed to make me think better of her memory. Either way, it didn't matter anymore. I drove back to Los Angeles with $4 million in untraceable assets and a plan that would take me far away from federal investigations and Russian organized crime and pawn shops that reminded me of everything I'd lost. But first, I had one more stop to make. The house looked smaller than I remembered. 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, Spanish tile roof, small yard with a lemon tree that hadn't been pruned in months. The place Lena and I had called home for 3 years, back when I thought we had a future together. I parked in the driveway and used my key to let myself in. The house was empty, but it still smelled like her perfume mixed with the vanilla candles she'd burned in the living room. I walked through the rooms slowly, remembering conversations we'd had, arguments we'd fought, quiet mornings when everything seemed possible. The kitchen where she'd told me she was destroying my life while making breakfast. The bedroom where I'd found the documents that started this whole mess. In her closet, I found clothes she'd left behind. Expensive dresses, designer shoes, jewelry that probably cost more than most people made in a year. All of it abandoned when she realized she was out of time and out of options. I gathered everything into boxes and loaded them into my car. I'd donate them somewhere, let them become someone else's treasures instead of reminders of someone who'd never really existed. The last thing I found was a photograph tucked behind a mirror in the bathroom. It showed Lena and me on our wedding day, both of us smiling like we meant it, both of us looking young enough to believe in happy endings. I stared at the photograph for a long time, trying to remember what it felt like to be the man in the picture. Someone who trusted easily and believed in people and thought love was stronger than ambition. That man was gone now, eliminated as surely as Lena had been eliminated in that hotel room in Tijuana. What was left was someone harder, smarter, more careful about who he trusted and why. I put the photograph in my pocket and walked out of the house for the last time. 3 days later, I met Agent Wexler for coffee at a diner near the Federal Building. He looked tired, like he'd been working too many hours on cases that didn't have clean endings. "We found her," he said as soon as I sat down. He heard. "Mexican authorities are handling the investigation, but we're cooperating fully. Whoever eliminated her was professional. No witnesses, no evidence, no leads." "Any theories?" "Plenty of theories. Not much proof." He stirred sugar into his coffee and looked at me across the small table. "The money she stole is still missing. $4.3 million, moved through accounts in 7 different countries. We've frozen what we can, but most of it disappeared into banks that don't cooperate with U.S. law enforcement. That's unfortunate." "Yes, it is." He leaned forward. "You wouldn't happen to know anything about where that money might have ended up, would you?" "No more than you do." "Because if someone were to have information about those accounts, information that led to the recovery of stolen funds, that would be very valuable to the federal government." "How valuable?" "Valuable enough to make certain cooperation agreements more favorable to all parties involved." I drank my coffee and thought about safety deposit boxes and handwritten notes, and $4 million in accounts that only I could access. "Agent Wexler, I want to make a deal." "What kind of deal?" "I give you everything I know about Lena's operation. Names, dates, methods, contacts. Everything that might help you build cases against the people she was working with. In exchange for full immunity. No prison time, no supervised release, no restrictions on my movement or activities." "That's asking for a lot." "I'm offering a lot. With what I know, you can take down a money laundering network that's been operating for over a decade. You can connect it to organized crime figures in 3 countries. You can recover assets worth tens of millions of dollars." Wexler was quiet for a long time, and I could see him calculating the political value of a case that big. "I'll need to discuss this with my supervisors," he said finally. "Of course. But assuming they agree, when would you be available to start providing this information?" "Immediately. But there's one condition." "What's that?" "When this is over, when all the cases are built and all the arrests are made, I disappear. New identity, new location, clean break from everything that happened here. Witness protection, something like that." 2 weeks later, I signed a revised cooperation agreement that gave me full immunity in exchange for information that would keep federal prosecutors busy for the next 5 years. I spent 3 months in debriefing sessions, telling everything I knew about money laundering operations, shell company structures, and the criminal networks that Lena had connected me to over the years. The information I provided led to 47 arrests in 6 countries, the seizure of over $30 million in assets, and the dismantling of one of the largest money laundering operations in the Western Hemisphere. The newspapers called it the biggest organized crime bust in a decade. They never mentioned my name. The island was everything the travel brochure had promised. White sand beaches, crystal clear water, palm trees swaying in tropical breezes that smelled like flowers and freedom. I'd been living there for 6 months under a name that had never been connected to money laundering or federal investigations or wives who died in Mexican hotel rooms. The house I'd rented was small but comfortable, with a view of the ocean and neighbors who minded their own business. Every morning I walked on the beach and watched fishing boats come in with their catches. Every afternoon I read books and drank rum and tried not to think about the past. Every evening I cooked simple meals and went to bed early, like a man who'd never had anything more complicated to worry about than whether it might rain. It was a good life. Quiet, peaceful, uncomplicated. It was also boring as hell. I'd thought I wanted simplicity after everything that had happened. I'd thought I wanted to disappear from the world of criminals and federal agents and elaborate revenge schemes. But after 6 months of tropical paradise, I was starting to realize that some people aren't built for retirement. My phone rang on a Tuesday morning while I was drinking coffee and watching pelicans dive for fish. The number was blocked, but I answered anyway. Vincent? The voice was familiar, but it took me a moment to place it. Cruz. How did you get this number? I have my ways. How's retirement treating you? Can't complain. Good, because I've got a business proposition for you. I'm not in the business anymore. This isn't that kind of business. This is the legitimate kind, the kind that makes money without involving federal agents or people getting shot. I walked out onto the deck and looked at the ocean while Cruz explained his idea. It involved importing specialty motorcycles from Europe, selling them to collectors in the United States, and using the profits to fund a legitimate security consulting business. Why me? I asked when he was finished. Because you understand how money works, how to move it, how to clean it, how to make it multiply. I need someone I can trust to handle the financial side while I handle operations. And you trust me. More than I trust anyone else. You could have sold me out to the feds, but you didn't. That counts for something. I thought about the offer while I watched a yacht sail past on the horizon. The people on deck were waving at me, probably thinking I was just another tourist enjoying paradise. I'll think about it, I said. Don't think too long. Opportunity doesn't wait forever. After I hung up, I sat on the deck for a long time, thinking about legitimate businesses and second chances, and whether a man could really change his fundamental nature. The money Lena had left me was enough to live comfortably for the rest of my life, assuming I was careful with it. I could stay on this island, or move to another island, or find a small town somewhere that nobody had ever heard of. I could read books and drink rum and watch sunsets until I died of old age and boredom. Or I could take the skills I'd learned in my previous life and use them for something legal, something that built instead of destroyed, something that created legitimate wealth instead of just moving dirty money from one place to another. That evening, I called Cruz back. I'm in, I said. Just like that? Just like that. What changed your mind? I looked out at the ocean where the fishing boats were coming in with their daily catch. Honest work, legitimate profit, something to show for their effort besides prison sentences and dead bodies. I got tired of running from who I used to be, I said. Maybe it's time to figure out who I can become. 6 months later, I was back in the United States, living in a city I'd never seen before, running a business that existed in daylight instead of shadows. The motorcycle importing operation was successful beyond our projections, and the security consulting business was growing steadily. I had new identity documents, a clean credit history, and a future that didn't involve federal investigations or organized crime figures or wives who tried to frame me for their crimes. Most importantly, I had something I'd never had before, a legitimate way to use the skills I'd learned in my illegitimate past. It wasn't the ending I'd planned when this whole thing started. It wasn't revenge or justice or even closure exactly. But it was a beginning, and sometimes a beginning is enough. The end.